Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out on what was a bit of a rainy Melbourne afternoon, but it's good to see Melbourne is alive and buzzing. We had an event last night at Fire Ground that was packed full of people as well, and our city is finally back alive. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners, I don't read this properly, it's all right, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm speaking, and pay my respect to elders past and present, and to the elders from other communities who may be here today. For those of you in the room that don't know me, I'm Jared Holland, I'm the CEO of MentorMatch. And for the last 2 years we've been formulating with Rotary 9800, as Dale alluded to, a concept of MentorMatch into what one day we genuinely believe could become the biggest mentoring program on the planet. We've just heard from Dale as what motivated Rotary to become involved in MentorMatch, and I'd like to briefly share why we have gone down this path. As many of you will be aware, in 2016, we started a business from our humble beginnings in Hawthorne into Carlton and then into the city to help international students obtain career-related employment. To assist in doing that at scale, we built our flagship technology platform, MentorMatch, to manage that full end-to-end program. And we've now taken that into South Africa, the UK, and now into Canada. Having placed over 10,000 international students, we've realised that we were missing something. It was professional mentoring. In the meantime, I think for probably at least the last 3 years, we're having initial conversations with Rotary, and particularly with Dale Hoy. When I first met Dale, like most of my connections that might lead to something, introduced by my mum, but somehow we sort of hit it off. We didn't know what it was, and I still remember a call I had with Dale probably literally 3 years ago. We think there's something there we can do with each other, but we literally had no idea what it was. There was just like this feeling, there was a buzz, we were like, what you do, what we do, there's got to be something. And it was like we're trying to force something to come out that we'd be able to work on. Then in the midst of the pandemic, it appeared like an angel coming down from heaven. Launch Vic, through Civic Labs, announced this challenge to assist international students with social connectedness. And there it was. The advantage of building long-term relationships over many years is that when an opportunity comes, we had 2 weeks to do something with it. Because you put the effort into building a relationship, it was really such a fast decision. I think we did it over 24 hours, Dale. Do we want to do this thing? And the answer was categorically yes. And I think it's a really important lesson that if you've got strong relationships with people, because effectively this is going into business with each other, right? This is a marriage. If you've got strong relationships, it's really easy to make fast decisions, and I don't think you can do that unless you're invested in those relationships. So within a couple of weeks we've submitted our application with 65 other people submitting for this challenge, and MentorMatch was born. We'll take it as 3 successful candidates, and Al Gibbs here from Launch Vic, so I don't know if you're on the decision-making panel, Al, but thank you if you decided to take our application. And we pulled Dom off from whatever the hell he was doing. I don't know what he was probably doing. Warwick kicked all his clients to the side. We headhunted Micah Tran, and the 3 of them went all in on developing this concept we'd somehow called MentorMatch. We're not very creative at MentorMatch, and go, let's call it MentorMatch, so that sort of worked itself out. At the end of the pre-accelerator, one organisation was taken to the next phase. Now, of course, the only one that could be chosen was MentorMatch, and that came with $150,000 of funding that was through Study Melbourne and Global Victoria. So the way this Civic Labs program works is that Study Melbourne was the sponsor. They pre-put some money, I think, into Launch Vic's bank accounts they couldn't pull out, and then when the successful candidate comes through, then we had access to funding. And that's when it really became a really viable product and a really viable program. So we thank Launch Vic and Civic Labs, thank you Al Luciano for establishing this program. Without that, we honestly would not be standing here today. It's sometimes, I don't know if I find this in business, that you need your hand forced at times. This program forced us to actually go and do this. We were speaking for years. Dom and I had many a conversation about we've got to get some mentoring for these international students. We've got to give them more support. And the months went by, the years went by. This forced our hand, and that program made us do it, and we're extremely grateful for that. We fast forward to today, there's been many iterations of the model. So I know Micah and Dom and even the Launch Vic and Civic Lab guys, we have changed this model plenty of times. That's another thing I've learned in business. Whatever you think the first thing is going to be, it's not going to be the same. It's going to change a lot, and it will change in big distances too. So we've gone and launched the pilots as Dale has suggested. There's been a lot of teething problems with it. We're working our way through it. For the mentors in the room and the mentees in the room, we're extremely grateful. Because without going and doing pilots and looking at what doesn't work and what does work, and Safari doesn't work, and all this sort of stuff, you can't build a scalable problem, a scalable solution that you really can take global. So we're very grateful for everyone that has worked on our pilots with us as we fine-tune the product. For us to be one of the biggest mentoring programs in the world, starting with Rotary 9800, and when, it's not an if, it's a when we are the biggest mentoring program in the world, we'll be giving all the credit back to District 9800, and whoever is the district governor at that point in time will get the credit. Dale mentioned we're doing a pilot in Vancouver at the minute. There's another program again from the Vic government who's supporting us to help us do that. We're taking it into Africa. So the wheels are already in motion. There's a lot of work to do, but it's started, and there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. It's from university, it's from mentors, and from other partners. We hope that everyone in this room will be proud when we do get there. But the first part we've got to do is get Victorian international students connected to as many Rotarians here as possible, particularly through District 9800. Somebody would have seen the coffee cart up in Albury. I'm sure you enjoy the humour of the people hanging around the coffee cart. But that's where it's all going to start from, and we want to build that out as much as possible. Dale will talk at the end about what engagement we need from you. I think there's 30 different Rotary clubs here tonight, which is just fantastic. And I know Don's licking his lips, he's like, that's 30 different presentations I get to do. So the plan is to get around and promote and get as many Rotarians involved, because we've got truckloads of international students ready to go, and now we want to build out our Rotarians.
Hey, Jared, 30 different audiences for my jokes.
Oh yeah, good luck with that. Except the ones that are in Albury that have already heard every single one of them. Just to expand on the support that the Victorian government has provided to getting a program like this going, I'd like to now invite Claire Harper, who's the Acting Manager of Market Development and Global Education for Global Victoria, to say a few words.
To lower it down even further. Thank you, Gerard. Good evening, everyone. My name is Claire Harper. I'm the Manager of Market Development and Global Education Network at Global Victoria, within the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions of the Victorian Government. It is a great pleasure to be here with you this evening. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered here tonight, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to the elders from any other communities who may be here today. On behalf of the Victorian Government, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone here, to our special guest, Zandra Mandela, Chairman of the Mandela Legacy Foundation, to Gerard Holland, CEO of Outcome Life, to Dale Hoy, District Governor of the Rotary Districts of Victoria, to the Rotarians with us, and as Gerard's just said, it's fantastic that we have representatives from 30 different clubs this evening. And finally, last but not least, to all our international students for being here with us tonight. Is there a slight echo on the reverb? I am delighted to speak at this MentorMatch Rotary launch event. MentorMatch is a joint initiative between Study Melbourne, Outcome Life and Launch Vic to strengthen international student inclusion and community connectedness in Victoria, in partnership with Rotary Victoria. I'm honoured that we are joined this evening by our keynote speaker and special guest, Zandra Mandela, by the power of the internet, Chairman of the Mandela Legacy Foundation and an innovator in solving global youth unemployment. I'm very much looking forward to hearing about his experiences and his insights into youth employment and empowerment and how we can apply them in a Victorian context. International education is Victoria's largest services export industry, with students playing a vital role in our economy and community. At Study Melbourne, we are serious about inclusion for international students and want all students to see their culture as a source of pride and empowerment. We know that Victoria is enriched by the cultural heritage every international student brings to our community. Study Melbourne is committed to supporting and empowering international students to connect with their local community, which allows them to succeed while studying and living in Victoria. MentorMatch is an Australian first and well-placed product to support newly arrived students' orientation, develop their intercultural, social and employability skills, and will significantly raise awareness of international students in the broader community. To deliver the best outcomes for students, Outcome Life has formed a partnership with Rotary Districts of Victoria that will enable all Rotarians to engage in mentoring international students in a structured format. So on behalf of Study Melbourne and the Victorian Government, I would like to thank the Rotary Districts of Victoria and all participating Rotarians, especially those of you in the room tonight. By mentoring and engaging with international students in your community, you help students to build a home away from home and make an enormous impact in their experiences in studying and living in Victoria. Thank you, Outcome Life, for your partnership with Study Melbourne and your commitment to improving international students' graduate outcomes and community inclusion. For all international students joining us tonight, Study Melbourne and the Victorian Government are committed to making sure you have the best possible time while you are in Victoria and leverage all that Victoria and Melbourne has to offer. MentorMatch is part of Study Melbourne's Empowerment Initiative, a series of programs for international students focusing on employability, entrepreneurship, leadership and social capital. So to find out more about those programs, please go to the Study Melbourne website, subscribe to our student newsletter and follow us on social media. Shortly we will hear from our esteemed guest speaker, Zondra. I am sure, like me, you will be inspired by his vision, experiences and insights into mentoring and connections with local community. I hope you will enjoy the time getting to know each other this evening, building your networks and exploring the opportunities to connect that MentorMatch can bring you. Thanks for connecting to the community we're building and have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I know that there's a lot of activity happening in a minute. There's a backlog for 2 years, so I appreciate you choosing to be with us tonight when there's lots of other things happening around. I think most of the people might be aware, but there's probably some of you aren't, that Zondra unfortunately had his flights messed around by Qantas a couple of days ago. So I'll maybe just recap the story for those that don't know it, but we got a call from Zondra very early in the morning. On Tuesday it must have been that Qantas had deferred his flights for 15 hours. So, okay, that's all right, did the maths. Yeah, you'd be here on time, you got 2 o'clock yesterday, we had an event last night. But Mr. Joyce is cheeky, and he waited until we got to 14 hours later, the 15-hour delay, and then decided just to cancel the flight. So we're angry, but okay, now what do we do? So then we did the maths, got Qatar Airways, got Singapore Airways, then we do this, go through Dubai, do it. And the earliest we could get him here was by 10 o'clock last night. Now we had a big event on last night, so thought, all right, well then, let's get him here for this event. Let's do that, we do the Mac, get him here, yep. We thought, oh, we've got to live stream him into the event tomorrow night, last night. So he's going to be halfway from Dubai to here. Last night, how are we going to stream him in from a plane? So logistically, it became an absolute nightmare. So on Wednesday morning, we made the call and said, we just got to cancel the whole thing, and we've scrambled to go and get production crews together. Big credit to Ross Stewart, who spent most of Tuesday night early up in the morning. They're 8 hours behind from us, getting production crew together. Zonda's wife got involved, and we managed to go and make sure we could live feed Zonda in. So we do apologise that Zonda was not here with us in person tonight. It was the plan. But the good news is that we're now going to bring him over in August. So we may well get free drinks and food again, and we'll do a live event. So that's the story behind it. It's been a bit chaotic, but for the people that work in my team, it's fantastic to work with solution-focused people. There's no problem you can't solve, so just having people that just get stuff done is a real blessing. It's not often that you get to introduce someone whose family has a long established history of changing the world twice in 2 days. So how lucky am I? It is definitely a privilege, and I think we'll probably end up getting Zonra up on the screen in a second too, I imagine. Zonra is actually watching from the camera at the back, by the way. So if you ever want Zonra to see your face, you need to turn around. He's been watching the whole time, and he can hear us, so he will appear up on the screen. I doubt there's a single person on the planet that doesn't know the recent history and of Zonra's beloved nation and the sacrifices that have been made by his grandparents. I'm not going to attempt to repeat that history, but I'm ridiculously excited to spend the next 25 minutes having an open discussion about how some of the mentors in Zonra's life have impacted him. It's actually quite incredible, some of the people that Zonra's met over his years and that he just calls friends. And when you think about his grandparents being in prison and the work they had to go to in order to make change, and so the people that became their broader family, there's probably not someone I've met yet that has had bigger benefit from having mentors around him beyond the obvious mentors. Ross, are we ready to get Zonra up, by the way? By the way, we had to pull last night and tonight together in like 24, 48 hours, so if the link doesn't work, then you got to forgive us. Is this microphone? That's working. Hey, Zonra, you can see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can see you, I can hear you. How are you doing?
Well, because you missed your flight, I have to sit here and talk to a screen.
I think that's a very misleading statement. I did not miss my flight. I was in front of I couldn't say the same for the aircraft, however.
I promise not to mention Qantas tonight. I think I did it enough last night that I'll leave it alone. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's guest, who's the grandson of Nelson and Winnie Mandela. What I think is far more important, has the responsibility of now preserving the Mandela brand's legacy. So everyone please... So Zonra, are you still in Joburg? Have you made it home to Cape Town?
No, I'm still in Johannesburg, so hopefully, after this I might, travel back to Cape Town. But, I'd like to mention, Gerard, I met you as the CEO of MentorMatch. I've seen you as an MC. I've seen you as an interviewer. I'm very impressed at your skill set. And I also saw Dom doing some stuff on the stage, so I'm glad you guys can multitask.
So now you realise what Dom does. We've done this stuff over Zoom for years on, and we still haven't had a meeting together, so it's coming.
It will all happen in time. I'd also like to thank everyone that's there. Claire, thank you for your contribution. To all the guests that are with us today. Unfortunately, I cannot be there, but I'd like to give you all a round of applause for making and giving us your time. Thank you.
So Zonra, we're, as you know, we're launching MentorMatch tonight. We know that mentoring is something that is very close to you. We'd like to explore a few thoughts on mentoring. We're going to have a bit of a conversation about it. You were born into a family with one of the most famous names in history. It's more recognisable globally than Coca-Cola. There are monuments in the streets, there's museums, there's universities, there's movies, there's place names, all bearing your surname. Everywhere you go, you see your surname. It can't be easy growing up with that. What did all that mean to you?
Look, the reality is that it was quite a different experience. When I was young, it was very clear based on the attention that our family gained. What my grandparents fought for was in fact very important, right? And at that particular point, it was very easy to identify them as enemy of the state, right? Because they fought against apartheid, they fought for equality, they fought for social justice, and that's really what the regime at the time did not want. So from the lens we will view that, we were pretty much an outcast, and our lives were in fact under threat. Now, fast forward to the point when now Nelson is released in 1990, and eventually ascended to become the first democratically elected president of South Africa. I mean, the story completely changed. At this particular point, the popularity was as a result that their successes and their achievements meant now our family was viewed as a hero in terms of the history of South Africa. But the consistency of those two very different experiences were very simple, that regardless of the time, it was the fact that we played a very important role in community, and we continue to do that today.
And just to provide a bit of context, Zon, how old were you during some of these milestones that were happening, particularly with your grandparents?
So when my grandfather was released, I was 7 years old. And I still have very vivid memories of, I'll say since I was 3 years old, when I speak to time spent with my grandmother, time spent with my mother. And, unfortunately, yes, we missed out on a few years with our grandfather, but I think there was a lot of effort made when he was released to ensure that the family was still able to live and bond together.
Yeah, and you're obviously born into a famous family, and at that young age, the probably most topical family on the planet. Has it been a burden or a responsibility for you? Like, how are you now, as growing up and in your older age now, how do you feel about it all?
Look, I mean, the practicality of that question, Jared, is that the burden was very physical and it was evident, right? Growing up as a child, knowing that at any given point you could have security detail come to your home, harass your mother, harass family members, that in reality is a real and physical burden, right? But when you now, look at the future,
Just tap the side of the screen, Jared.
Lucky we have technicians in the back.
Turn the picture on.
This happened last night at a really sentimental time as well.
He's back.
Hey, Zon, we lost your connection for about 20 minutes. For about 30 seconds. But you just finished telling us that you'd be at home and people would come into your house and they'd harass your mother, they'd harass other family members, and that part was a burden, and then you froze in a really weird position.
Yes. So the point was that, Jared, that is a very real and physical burden, right? Because of the blood, sweat, and tears and the lives that were sacrificed in that particular time, okay? But then the reality is that, people fought for something, they fought for justice, and they fought for equality for all. And eventually were able to give the majority of South Africans freedom. So now the natural responsibility that one feels, having been given access to freedom, access to education, it's really, it's very simple. As a member of society that cares about the human race, what do I then do with my access, my privilege, but what do I do with the freedom I've been given to ensure that it is consistent and we transfer that concept of freedom, potentially economic freedom, to those that need it most.
So who taught you how to be a man?
Right? You heard all of that.
Yeah, we got that. Yeah. Who taught you how to be a mentor?
You know, to be honest, it's a community I come from, Jared. You know, our African society emanates from a lot of cultural and traditional practices. Regardless of the fact that I was born in Johannesburg, I'm a son from a village called Ulu. And, you know, we've got a council of elders. You know, the reason why we respect elders is because they always play a very important part in terms of the continuous ability to identify with who we are, our traditional practices. And, you know, to be honest, that really molded our identity. Many people do not know that the name Madiba is not in fact Nelson's name, right? Madiba is an identity of the clan we all come from. So we are, you know, we've got our own king and we were all chiefs because we are part of a royal bloodline. So when we refer to one another, we refer to each other as Madiba, Zondwa, okay, and there are many words I would pronounce that you may not understand. But the point is, use the clan name to give us this identity and define who we are as a Mandela family. But very importantly, it signifies where we come from so that wherever we are, we're always able to relate that to our intention.
And you're very humble, so you're probably not going to say this, but I understand that you've just recently been appointed as a tribal chief.
Yeah, that's correct.
Too humble. What about your grandparents? I imagine they mentored a lot of people. So talk to us a bit about that, about some of the mentoring that your grandparents did.
You know, it's very interesting. So I'll tell you some of the fun parts, right? I'm sure we've got a lot of Michael Jackson fans in the room. You know, I'm born on the 29th of August. I'm a Michael Jackson purist. And, you know, this is an individual which many would remember was, you know, heavily guarded, was a very reserved individual. He was a purest form of celebrity. I remember meeting Michael Jackson once, all right? Not knowing that I would potentially meet Michael Jackson at least 100 times. Because he would come to our home, unannounced, knock on the door, walk in, and eventually like take off his shoes. So I'd walk around the house with no shoes. And all he would do besides engaging with the family, he'd always take a moment to engage with the old man, right? So I think beyond the statesman, there was a lot of very social and cool engagements that the old man had. There's in fact another interesting story, which I actually just remember now. Are we all familiar with Richard Branson? Yeah, okay. So my grandfather had this unique ability of like, you know, asking for something and naturally you just couldn't refuse, right? And so there was a gym not far from where my grandfather stayed in Houghton. And this particular gym was going through financial difficulty. And, you know, it was a place where the presidential helicopter would land if my grandfather needed to travel. And, you know, my grandfather just picked up the phone, he called Richard and he said, "Hey, Richard, apparently you're into gyms. I've got an opportunity for you. Come save this gym." And that's in fact how Virgin Active and the Virgin Collection started in South Africa. So the point is that you had all of these very influential, independent leaders, you know, with very interesting crafts, but they revered the gentleman simply because of what he stood for and were willing to challenge themselves and participate in solving community issues, right? Yeah.
So being the top entrepreneur that I am, I've been waiting for Richard Branson to invite me to Mecca Island. Can you get that sorted out somehow?
Done.
You say no or yes just there? No, good. You got 150 people as witness that. Sweet. That's how we'll be on the way for a while. What about a supermodel called Naomi Campbell? I understand that she referred to.
Yeah, she would be adopted grandchild.
Right. So your sister is Naomi Campbell.
Yeah.
Can I interview her as well?
As you can tell, her looks brushed off for you.
I understand she called Nelson an honorary godfather, so that really was a close relationship.
No, and you said godfather because he'd give you an offer you couldn't refuse.
Got it. Let's talk about your family tree. So Nelson was born 18th of July 1918 into the royal family of the Thembury tribe. His father, Gutler, how do I say that? Gutler?
Jacques. So you combine the D and the L to make one letter.
I think there's an app to learn this sort of stuff. What's it called? Duolingo or something. Adam, how many days is your streak of Duolingo? I think I'll get onto that. All the African kids who we've played so far, I can't pronounce any of their names on this, so I do need some training. But he was set to be the chief of the village, and at the time was principal counsellor to the acting king of the Thembury people. Oh, there's another name I can't say, so I'm going to leave that. He died when Nelson was only 9 years of age, and the king adopted Nelson as his son and started preparing Nelson for a role in leading the tribe. How much did this shape who Nelson became, do you think?
One of the things I continue to stress, especially from the point of public opinion, is to ensure that people understand that Nelson is a product of his community. He's a product of the village he grew up from, and he's a son of the African soil. So not this statesman, which is a global icon that people want to only focus on. It was very important to identify with his heritage and his origin, right? The reality is that I think from a character point of view, yes, he understood his role in that particular community, but I think as a young person, he felt that he could also add a lot more value to broader society out of that particular community. Hence, he had an arranged marriage, and so therefore he ran away from home and found himself in Johannesburg, and he said that this is where he's going to also find his purpose. He did a lot of ship work, eventually worked in as a clerk in a law firm, and that really gave him the inspiration to study law. But if anything, I think he was just simply honoring the reality that he believed he could serve community even at a broader scale. And that's really what drove him throughout his journey.
Well, part of what we want to achieve in MentorMatch is a lot of female participation, particularly a lot of female mentors, and we'll work on that, particularly District 1900, into really getting a high percentage of female participation. You grew up with three very strong women, so your grandmother, your mother, and your aunt. How did they shape you?
Look, as a man, as a husband, and as a father, I'm very proud to have been raised by women. A lot of people do not know that the African community is in fact a lot more matriarchal than patriarchal, right? We respect the identity of our mothers, and we believe that they are the mothers of the nation, right? So it was honestly a privilege because it gave me a very unique perspective. I did have many male role models, but I was able to see the influence from both sides.
Yeah, great. What are you mentoring anyone right now? Either informally or formally?
John, I'm not sure if they've confirmed whether I'm mentoring them or not, but they tend to
Am I one of them?
they tend to see me often, ask me very peculiar questions, but I am not sure if they go out to the public and actually say, that guy's my mentor. The reality is that I am exposed to a lot of younger people because of the internship we make. We create a lot of jobs for youth, and I do get the opportunity to engage with them. And to be honest, I hope through the engagement I do impart some wisdom where necessary. But the reality is that, from a mentoring point of view, I must say, based on the interactions I have, I definitely do have very organic engagements where I shed light because I definitely do know better, but I do not know everything. Yes.
I think that's like most of us, though, mate. What the formal and informal mentoring is an interesting one, because one of the things we've spoken at length about with Warwick, Warwick isn't here today, has been very much an important pillar in doing what we're doing. But we want to make sure that the formal mentoring happens, but then we want the mentees to then attend the Rotary events, to go to volunteering, and all of that then becomes informal mentoring. So you end up building this big scale, being a help international students. They don't just have one person that's helping them, they end up with a whole tribe of people helping them. And I think it's a really important part of the program we're trying to build, is that we enable the informal mentoring by starting with some formal mentoring.
Sure.
I'm going to ask about one or two more questions, and then we do want to throw it out to the floor for a couple of questions. We can't go forever, so if you do have a question, maybe make sure you're up close to the front. We might do 2 or 3 questions for Zonwa, so if you do have a burning question for him in about 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, we will invite you to do that. Zonwa, what do you see as being important in a mentor-mentee relationship?
I think the most important thing is trust. Right, so that would be the first thing. And I honestly believe that any relationship should be fluid. So it should be evident that the purpose of our relationship is both the opportunity for us to grow, is the opportunity for us to have fun, but the opportunity for us to actually face very difficult challenges. So it has to be, established with trust. It has to be honest, and we must, simply understand that within such a relationship, the appropriate criticism should definitely be allowed.
Okay, great. My final question: as chairman of the Mandela Legacy Foundation, you do travel the world a lot. You're seeing a lot of things. All the time. In fact, part of the challenge of getting Zonwa to Australia is just being in America for several weeks. He was coming from Atlanta, went home to see his family for a couple of days, and was getting on a Qantas flight here. So, the schedule is packed, and when one flight gets cancelled, it throws it into chaos. But you see a lot of education, employment initiatives in your travels. What's your opinion on what we're doing with MentorMatch? The support we've had from the Victorian government, the support we've got from Rotary, bringing it all together. You're seeing a lot of things. What do you think about what we're doing here?
Look, from the onset, I think the collaboration with Rotary is definitely a masterstroke. They represent an organization of great talents, of great wisdom, and in our ability to in fact connect these two worlds in terms of mentees and mentors that exist within the Rotary space. I really think it's a very important step in actually maintaining the consistency of our message. Because one thing we've always said is that it's great to give young people an opportunity, but we want them to work in jobs where they believe that they actually have a consistent career, right? And the career trajectory can actually only be enhanced through the concepts of mentorship, through the access of training and further education. But in terms of giving young people the necessary tools, because what we've always said is that the reality is, it's not the case that our young people are not capable, it's simply the fact that they do not have the right people who believe in them and see their full potential, right? And so when we're able to marry that world and ensure that Once again, these guys have the necessary tools. I think it feeds directly to our message about empowering young people and giving them economic independence.
Yeah, I think one of your quotes last night was about, I can't remember exactly, but believing is impossible, right? And you look at all the challenges that Nelson had in 27 years in prison, and there's no way at times you would have thought he could get to where he get to, but believing it's possible and getting good people around you is the only way it can happen. We do have some questions. We have to bring the mic over. Oh, you got a mic? Yep. Oh, I'm pressing tonight. We have some questions from the audience on it, so if you can't hear them, let me know.
I finally contributed.
Well, I'm actually happy, really happy to see you, Zombwa, and also the way you have spoken about your grandfather. Your grandfather was a great man. Everything has been seen in the pictures you have put in the video before. But I have to tell you, we are talking about mentorship. But as African people, we are also facing problems here in Australia. People might say, well, this is mentorship, but please, when you come to speak with what's the mentorship group, make a time to speak to African kids. They will gain a lot from you and the legacy that your grandfather left. I hope you understand. My name is Selba Gonozaluka, but my origins are from KwaZulu-Natal. My sister is living in Durban. So, I'm a little bit emotional. Your grandfather spent some time in jail. There's so many kids in jail in this country. We need you here. If your grandfather went and helped that gym, whatever you can, I'm not asking for money, but just asking for you to speak to the boys so that maybe they can change. And I'm a woman who believes in Ubuntu, just like what your grandfather said. There's another woman here as well, Gertrude. We are Ubuntu women. Thank you for accepting to help the international students. And I also have to thank Dale Hoy for inviting me to come here. Please, make a time. See the African kids. They are like you. They need a mentor like you. I hope you understand what I'm asking. Thank you.
My name is Gertrude Mache. I speak Xhosa Kanwili. I lived in Cape Town, studied at the University of Western Cape. I am the CEO of Africa Thrive, being launched here in Melbourne as from this week. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. There are a lot of Africans in the diaspora like myself, like Selba. What is South Africa doing to bring us back home? I believe we have come to learn, to study, the students that are being supported by this mentorship program. There's a lot of knowledge and skill that is being amassed by being in first world countries. What is South Africa doing to bring us back? Because I do believe we are part of the solution to solving Africa's problems.
Can I believe the name is Selba. The first point that was raised, right, which, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Zama.
Okay, cool. So, as you were speaking, I was also quite emotional in terms of, there's a very sentimental process even around mentorship. I know that we've spoken at length about my grandfather, but the reality is, my grandfather is actually only half of the story. The greater half is in fact the Winnie Mandela story, right? And in many instances, unfortunately, people would want to dichotomize that particular history because we always need a villain or a hero. But the reality is it was a joint effort that in fact led us to where we are. So here you are, you've got a man in prison for many years, 27 years, but before his release. You must understand that in this particular period, this person's spirit was broken on many occasions. His hope was lost. My grandfather, in fact, never believed he would, in fact, reach a point where he'd be released from prison. But the person that, in fact, believed in that reality was my grandmother, right? And on a regular basis would engage with Nelson, look at him in the eye, guide his thoughts, settle his fears, and through that process of mentorship, she in fact gave us this great leader that we as community can now look up to, right? So it's the process of mentorship, even beyond what we're talking about, Salva, is the fact that yes, it really is about engaging with those that need that particular message most. And if anything, it's just a concept of instilling hope, reminding people that they are worthy, reminding people that the world deserves a contribution, and if anything, just making sure that they believe in themselves. So, you touched on something very sentimental, and it's also just our collective responsibility to never, in fact, forget the contribution of women within our society. The other question Gertrude around what is South Africa doing? Look, I believe one of our disadvantages is that we built a community that believes that the only way you're able to succeed is by your very conventional career paths, right? People should study in order to work for a bigger organization, not realizing that we should have put a lot more effort around social entrepreneurship, empowering young entrepreneurs, funding young entrepreneurs in order to create a lot more opportunity for many individual organizations to engage in. So I think our vision now is very simple. Yes, we're creating jobs for young people. Excuse me. But beyond that, we train young people within our work environment, not only to be agents, but to be supervisors, to be managers, and in fact to be owners of business and leaders of various industrial enterprises. So the more entrepreneurs we can then develop, I believe, in that ecosystem, we'll then have a lot more opportunities for Africans within the diaspora to in fact find a place within the working economy of South Africa.
And just to add to the first point that was made, so we're going to hopefully have Zonda out here in August. We have flexibility in what we do with that schedule. So our team would love to work with you. Let's go and organise some things when Zonda's here. We need your help with it because we're not connected close enough to the community here. But we can organise events, functions, talking, whatever we want to do. So we've got 2 months to plan something with you, and that could be multiple things. But we'll commit to working on that with you.
Thank you very much.
Hi Zonwa, it's an absolute privilege to get to ask you a question today. My name is Anjali, and likewise, I grew up very close to my grandparents. I was raised by them. It's actually their 50th wedding anniversary today, and so before this, I told them I was coming to talk with you, and they were so happy. So thank you for being also the anniversary present from me. It saved me a lot of money, but it's an
Angelique, chances on you when I come, then.
Yes, it can be on me, yes. I grew up as a very ambitious young woman in a small island in Malaysia called Penang. And growing up, I was very driven, community driven, and at 15, I was actually an ambassador at the United Nations and the General Assembly. And growing up in school, your family was one of my main inspirations. And now I've gotten amazing opportunities in the startup world. This year, I'm expecting my debut release of my children's book internationally. And with that being said, through the women you've grown up around and through this amazing, through your amazing mentees and even you yourself, what's one habit you've instilled in yourself that you found is key to success for young talent?
So, your experience, right, within your community being a young leader, right? So, my mother, there's a moment in history where she gave this very powerful speech, right, to hundreds of thousands of South Africans, and I think she was either only 13 or 15, right? But, this was a young person thrust into the position of leadership as a result of the void of the physical fact that, her father, in fact, was not there. And, so, yes, there could be many issues about the fact that, she didn't grow up close to her father, but the reality is that if you want to think positively about it, it led her and the other women around her to, in fact, take on responsibility and become, the leaders that they were meant to be. So they were inspired by the result of something very difficult, right? You also then mentioned something I want to congratulate you on the book, right?
Thank you.
But yeah, to answer that from a very personal point, that I believe we need to instill the purpose of possibility, even in young people. So my children, in fact, were authors at the ages of 7 and 6. They were published authors. What we did was, we ensured that when they had questions, they saw their great grandparents on television. They saw many, historical documentaries around South Africa's history, and so they would naturally ask a lot of questions. And you could have did one thing. You could have said, okay, these are just kids. Let's give them the story of the birds and the bees. But we chose not to do that, right? We were very transparent, very honest, because it's their responsibility to assume their position in the greatest dynasty at a very early stage, because then they understand their responsibility within the context of the rest of the world. So very simply, I believe in the concept of, not judging people on age, not judging people on status, but wherever it is necessary, I think must always instill a message of possibility. And so I'm very proud of my kids having authored a book at the ages of 7 and 6, and they published it globally. It's called Granddad Mandela. That's my sales pitch. It's available everywhere. I want to get the sales. But the point is that, Angelique, it leads us to achieving great things. So, let's not be discriminate in who we pass on the message of support to.
Thank you.
This will be the last question, so we'll make these questions have been awesome, by the way. One more.
And Judge, 1, 2, 3, 5. Just surprise me.
Mate, we're paying for the bar tab. We can't go all night.
I won't surprise you. I would like you to please identify this
But you might not be able to see, it's all the way up there.
And I'll pick you up.
I don't know, what can you see, Zonda? You probably can't see.
I was so confused. I think they might be a pair of hush puppies.
Could you answer that?
Okay, let me see.
We've got some help, Sandra.
She has an outfit with the print of a Zulu shield and
A Zulu shield.
No, I'm not.
That is what your dad taught me. I was a little girl growing up in a suburb called Durban. That's in KwaZulu-Natal, and I'm sure you're so familiar with that. I am proud to be a South African. Having said that, I was also ashamed of being South African because there was times when I said, hey, I'm not a South African. When that rugby team went and bit the ears, I don't know if you recall that. It happened in New Zealand. And you know what? I was in New Zealand at that time. I was so embarrassed to say, hey, I'm a South African. But then I thought about it. Why should I be embarrassed? What happened is what happened. And that's where you come in. I admire you for doing what you're doing, the legacy of your dad. And that's what I'm proud of. I looked up to your dad. He was a man in a million. I put him in the category of Mother Teresa because the transition, I was growing up, I didn't know what was going to happen. That uncertainty left me bamboozled. If it wasn't for your dad, after the 27 years coming up and bringing that into context of a peaceful transition. I know people say, okay, it was de Klerk that was behind it, but he worked with de Klerk. I know that. Serving 27 years imprisonment meant a lot to me because I was a nobody. When it was a white government, who was I? No one. No one. Now that it is Mandela, that's the one that stood up, fought for people. Okay, I may not have a voice now, I'm a minority. I am of Indian origin, but apartheid kept us apart, and it was constitutional. We were not allowed to come to Australia. Why? Because it was constitutional that I was a black. Was I a black? No. India now will not recognize me as Indian. Why? Because I was born in South Africa. Because I went on the ship or whatever. I had to work on the land. But it wasn't me. It was my forefather. My grandfather was instrumental in contributing, educating us, put us through it. If you know the M.L. Sultan College in Pietermaritzburg, that's where my grandfather donated money to education, to educate us, to put us where we were. I felt so sorry for, I'm using this word, please forgive me, it is blacks, and you know what I'm talking about. Because that's what we were known as, blacks. Whites, blacks. Hey, it was constitutional. Who are we to fight with them? We couldn't. I couldn't go to a restaurant, like a fast food place, to sit next to my white friend who was of Dutch descent. She was from Holland, but I couldn't sit next to her. Whereas an Indian, same as me, come up to me and say to me, I'm sorry ma'am, we cannot serve you. You've got to sit on the other side. How do you think I felt? How do you think I felt with my children being brought up in that situation? I moved for the same reason as plenty other people did. refugee status. You know that for a fact. South Africans were not given refugee status. Point blank, because Australia will not accept us as refugees. Whites, yes, not the blacks. And I don't blame them, because that's what they were brought up like. They fear us, we fear them. So I leave it to you, and I'm so proud of you working behind your kids, and I'm so proud of you carrying your dad's legacy. I will stand by you 110% to help to take Nelson Mandela to another level. I'm prepared to mentor, I'm an ex-South African. And I say ex-South African because Australia did give me now the opportunities. I'm grateful to Australia. I'm very happy to be a citizen of Australia. They now have changed, and it's not their fault. It's what they were embedded with. They feared us, we feared them. And that's what it went down in South Africa as well.
Thank you very much for those comments.
And I think the question was that when you come out, can you please come to the Rotary Club of Altona?
Please do.
Yes.
Please do. I will tell you, you come there and we will give you a big meal.
And you know what, but I honestly, I can't follow that up with the comment. I just want to say thank you for that powerful contribution.
And it is so lovely to hear these personal stories too, because we can watch videos, we can read books, but when you actually see and meet people that have gone through some of those experiences, I feel more connected to you just by experiencing that. So we thank you for sharing that. We do have a little bit of a presentation now, a bit of a gift for someone that is about to depart as the district governor. Maybe Zomri might say a few words.
Yeah. In fact, is Mr. Dale Hoy still there? He's still in the crowd, right?
He's still here, he hasn't left. Maybe you want to stand up, Dale, you want to look up in that direction. So when I come up on stage, I can see you. Excuse me.
Okay. Please, great to meet you. I hope I was the right person to do this. So we've got this Mandela Legacy Foundation pin. We give it to people that have, really led, the transition in terms of supporting various programs that we participate in. And I know that you've been quite instrumental in this mentorship program and the MentorMatch program. So, on behalf of Mandela Legacy, I'd just like to thank you and honor you with this particular pin. It's a hand which is, in fact, my grandfather's handprint. And the reason, oh my gosh, Jared, what's going on? What are you doing? And the handprint is, in fact, very significant. The message is simple. It's that, when he retired, but never really did, but he just left us with a very important message that, guys, I've done my bit, now it is in your hands. So, as members of society that continue to give back to the community, I just want to say thank you, and please may you receive this particular pin from Jared. I hope it doesn't drop it.
Thank you, Zogma, and thank you, everyone. Honestly, it's not about me, but if we can help to actually make this program work, that's what it's all about, and I think we're off to a great start. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in August in sunny Melbourne. I think you've got quite a lot of fans based on the feedback tonight in this room, so we look forward to seeing you at that time. Great.
We look forward to it. Thank you so much.
We're closing now, so I think the refreshments are still available until 9 o'clock, so thank you everyone for attending tonight. There will be a follow-up email with information on the Mentor program. Also, I'd like to acknowledge a good friend of mine, District Governor Bill Degner, who I didn't acknowledge before. And, I was acknowledged as being the Governor for Victoria, which is not correct. So it's one little bit of Victoria. It's a few little ways from Clubs, and I'm doing this for another 4 weeks, but who's counting? Thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope you got some value out of it, and thank you everyone, all the various partnerships, and Zoma, thank you again. Thank you so much.